sanity check yourself, temperature check yourself, and make sure that you're not mistaking wisdom for just hiding.
And that's part of the reason to get it out the door so that you can start to experience what your thing is like out in the world and then start to hone your craft, start to improve it, make new versions of it, listen to the people who are reacting to it. But if you sit with it in your own head forever, not only do you never launch it, but you've built up what that launch means to a point of unmanaged expectations, and the fear of putting it out on the market stalls you to the point of being paralyzed by it.
It's Slackers, unscripted business insight from two lifelong builders. I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Jamie, and we are here to show you how big ideas travel across industries.
Consider it your weekly companion on a path to better work and a better way of working.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6. We love the countdown, don't we? Right? That moment before liftoff. The promise that something big, huge is about to happen. It's hardwired into us. The adrenaline of beginnings, the myth of the grand opening. But here's the real thing. Real, meaningful, impactful work rarely starts with fireworks. It starts in the quiet moments after the launch, after the thing goes out the door. The messy, unglamorous stretch where you're still figuring it out, you're still tinkering, you're still showing up. You see, we've been taught that the launch is the victory lap, that success happens in one dramatic moment. But the truth is, momentum doesn't begin when the countdown clock hits 0. It begins on day 2 and day 3 and day 4 and when no one's counting anymore. Because that's where consistency lives. And that's where learning happens. And that is where trust gets built. So Jonathan, it's good to see you, brother. Welcome back. Here we are. It's Slackers. Right out of the gates, we're talking about launching things. Why do you think we've all gotten so addicted to this idea of the big moment, the big launch, the fireworks, when the real work begins after all that?
Well, there's a couple of things there, right? One is fireworks are super exciting. So I think there's this buildup of the release, the album release, the movie release, the product release, the big exciting thing that's all happening that rounds everybody up to this big reveal that something amazing is going to be shown to you. But the other part of that is when you mention when the real work begins right after it. Real work is typically not the most exciting thing, right? We don't really want to celebrate all the work that's about to happen. Certainly our fans and the people we're pushing this to are not looking forward to all the work that comes next. So it's hard to get super excited about this really big hill that we have to climb now, which can sometimes be a little daunting. And the uncertainty of what that means. Sometimes that moment is also leading to this amount of work that's coming that has a lot of uncertainty around it. Like, I don't even maybe know what that work is yet. And maybe it's really hard, complicated work because I wasn't expecting the reaction that I got, or I didn't really know where this was going to go once it got out there. And so there's like anxiety around that moment too, of getting excited about the big moment. But also, what does that mean? Like, it might mean that all of a sudden I have a pretty steep hill to climb. And up until the fireworks or the launch or that exciting moment, it felt like that was the thing, right? Like this is a crescendo of like, this moment has now happened. You're right. I'm now going to get real feedback from the people I made this for. I might even get some things. I might hear things that I don't want to hear. I might hear some things that I didn't really expect to hear, or that I thought I'd solved and maybe I didn't solve it as good as I could have. And there's a lot of anxiety around what might that be. Even though as the consumers of that, we often get really excited about those big moments. How much money did it make in its opening weekend? And like how many millions of things were purchased in the first day or 2 days or 3 days as some measure of goodness of that. But in those moments of prior to that is shaping and preparing this for being to go out in the world, but also the apprehension about like, okay, once that moment has passed, what do we have in front of us? Like, is it going to be exciting? Is it going to be scary? Is it going to be more work than we can handle? Did we fail? Was it a rousing success? That level of uncertainty on the spectrum of where we think that might land, I think sometimes puts us in a spot where the big launch almost feels like a scary thing. You know, not only is it the launch itself, but the hoopla around it almost feels like we almost have to do that so that we justified all the work that we just did. But in reality, what you really want to do is prepare for that journey you're about to be on, and getting it out the door so that you can actually start that work.
So maybe a little table setting, right? Because I think, you're spot on with a lot of the emotions that are wrapped up in this concept of launching things. But we're also talking about this because here we are on our show. Our show is new. This is, it's not the first episode anymore, but it's new to us. We haven't been doing the show for 20 years. So, personally, we've had to wrestle with this idea of, here we go, we made a thing. What does it mean to go launch the thing and put it out into the world? At the same time, you and I have both been fortunate enough, or I don't know, I guess unfortunate enough, depending on which way you want to slice it, to be a part of teams who have built and launched things. And we have seen the spectrum of launches. You've seen the thing that quietly went out the door late, let's say, and we've seen the things that have been enormous spectacles. I mean, true fireworks. Literally, I remember being at South by Southwest, and it's Kanye and Jay-Z on two different pillars, opposite sides of an arena, because there's a tech company that's launching a music service and they're there to hype the whole thing. And I would pose, and I think maybe that's where, I certainly want to hear your take on this, that as we really roll back the tape on what it was like to launch lots of different types of stuff, our show included, and all kinds of big flashy things, it seems almost like a universal truth that the launch is not really that important. It's kind of important, but maybe not for the reason that everybody thinks it's important. It's not important for the spectacle itself. It's important because it just allows you to start, really, right? And ideally, you kind of want the launch to just happen more than anything, because then lots of times that's when it feels, whew, maybe you can exhale. You're like, okay, so tomorrow then we show up and then we go do the work. But there's not a lot of conversation about that. There's not a lot of conversation usually about, all right, day 2, day 3, guys. It's all about, the countdown clock hits 0. That's everyone's attention, or that's where the attention is focused. That seems wild to me.
I think so much of it too is, it really is the expectation of what does that launch really mean? Really, I think where the fear of launching something can kind of weigh on you is if you feel like the expectations are kind of out of line with what the opportunity is, right? So if you've got Kanye and Jay-Z and you're paying millions of dollars and you're doing all the things to launch your stuff, you're setting some pretty high expectations that this is going to be a rousing success. I'm betting on the fact that it's so good that it's worth this kind of spectacle. And everyone involved with launching that thing might feel the pressure of that, of being like, is this worth this? Like, did we do enough to have Kanye and Jay-Z perform in honor of this thing coming to market? Have we set the right expectations with everybody? And sometimes that, I think, can weigh on us. And a lot of our launches, I think, become much more personal than that. You're trying to make sure that whatever your product is, whatever your art is, whatever your solution is, whatever it might be, that it's going to be received for what it is for the audience it's intended for in that moment, so that you can kind of set your expectations and you can get to market. You can start that next climb of your journey and start bringing more people into the fold that were there, at launch and beyond, and starting to frame up like, what does success really mean? Because sometimes I think that's a really important part of your launch is like, what are we really trying to accomplish by getting this out the door? Is it that we have to achieve some massive financial result from this to happen? And am I on a clock that financial result has to happen within a certain amount of time after my launch? Am I going to be judged by its level of goodness immediately? And is that going to somehow affect the opportunity that my thing has? And so we kind of wrap ourselves up with that in a lot. And sometimes I think we put unnecessary pressure and expectations on the launch of the thing. Because if you don't have those massive financial expectations or those massive audience reactions or all of these things tied to it that says, well, if I don't have 1 million people that like my thing in the first 3 days, then we failed. To be able to set expectations like that, you really need to make sure you understand your audience and your launch and your market size and all of these things so that you don't start by saying, well, if we don't have 1 million people that love us on day 1, then we failed. You have to be really sure that you even have the opportunity to do that, right? Like, am I launching in enough theaters or in enough places where I could actually deliver this in the volume and the quantity and the opportunity that we've all set for ourselves? Is that how attainable is that even? Am I really experiencing there the attainability of that? You talk about the show, and a lot of it is we've talked about for years about doing a show like this. And it's not something we just launched one day, right? Like we talk about it, we kicked it around. Yeah, maybe we should do this, maybe not. Maybe we have time, maybe I don't. What's your schedule look like? What's mine look like? Years go by, conversations happen. Wow, we should record this. We should put this out. We should do this thing. It's fun. This will be fulfilling for us. And maybe people will like it and it'll be a fun project to do. And then you get to work. And then eventually you say, is this perfect? No, it's not perfect. Is it good enough for the audience we're trying to speak to right now and for ourselves? Yeah, maybe it is. Will it be better a month or 2 or 3 or months from now or a year from now? Yeah, it almost certainly will be. And that's part of the reason to get it out the door so that you can start to experience what your thing is like out in the world and then start to hone your craft, start to improve it, make new versions of it, listen to the people who are reacting to it, the people who love it. What do they love about it? The people who are critical about it, what are they critical about? Are those things you can address? And you just start to kind of work on it. But if you sit with it in your own head forever, like not only do you never launch it, but you've built up what that launch means to a point of unmanaged expectations, and the fear of putting it out on the market absolutely stalls you to the point of being paralyzed by it.
I think it's worth noting that you and I both come from a tech background. Not entirely, not forever and always, but tech is a big part of both of our backgrounds. And there certainly is a culture, there are tropes in the world of tech around just move fast and break stuff, that whole kind of mindset. But even examples that get trotted out routinely, like Reid Hoffman, right? Founder of LinkedIn, classic quote. I feel like I've heard every engineer or some product person always say, right? If you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product or your thing, you launched too late. That was Reid Hoffman's quote. I mean, I don't disagree, but I know that I bring up tech because I know that that's sort of a mindset that is often shared and discussed in the context of a technology-oriented organization or a team. I think one of the reasons we wanted to talk about this topic, on the pod, is that we're certainly not advocating to go move fast and break stuff and release things and put things into the world that are broken and go so quickly to launch that they're just ineffective and that they do damage, and that we're just saying, hey, here's some bro Silicon Valley mindset of move fast, break stuff and all that. I think we wanted to talk about this because the point is, as a builder, if someone listening to this is thinking, well, I've got ideas, or I'm a part of a team that's building a thing, I'm managing a team that's getting ready to put a thing out the door, but we've been sitting on it for a while. Just sanity check yourself, temperature check yourself, and make sure that you're not mistaking wisdom for just hiding. Right? For just wrestling with the emotional fear of releasing something before it's ready. We're not advocating for putting something into the world that's fundamentally broken or will do damage, but just make sure that you're not holding it back because of some fantasy, or that you're just mistaking fear of the thing being put into the world. And frankly, it's just a little bit safer because you get to avoid being criticized by not putting something out into the world. Make sure that those aren't the reasons that you're holding back. Right? Because at least the launch, it's certainly worth celebrating, but it's almost like it's worth celebrating because it allows you to begin. And that's a big deal, because then you get to show up the next day and the next day and the next day. And as we've experienced, I think, and what I bet we were both advocating for, is more an approach of, let's make sure that the launch feels special and important, but it's not everything. And let's not let that saddle us with such heavy weight that we don't ever do it. And let's make sure that we understand one of the only playbooks that has seemed to deliver consistently over time is a playbook of, to what degree can we consistently show up and continue to work on our thing now that it's out in the world and people can interact with it and we can learn from it. I mean, I think that's why we wanted to get into this today. I want to make sure it's not really mixed up with that other, like, well, just toss it out there because, whatever, it's done. Hit publish because even though the sentence isn't done.
Exactly. I mean, I love basic analogies. Maybe that's a character flaw of mine, but you always have to be aware of what are you making and who are you making it for? Because I love the cake analogy, because if I got a room full of people that just want some cake, I just really need to make a cake that's edible, right? That people are like, this is a good cake, and it's fine. We're certainly not advocating you pull your cake pan out while it's still soupy and liquid and gross and just give it to everybody because that's just good enough. But you're not trying to win a baking competition either, right? Like, this is not like, you don't have to decorate it perfectly. It doesn't have to have everything to be picture perfect when all you're doing is trying to got like 5 or 6 people in the house just want some cake. To be able to meet their needs in that moment, it doesn't have to be this level of perfection. I'm reminded of when we launched Slacker Radio, we were at South by Southwest, and we're doing all the press, we're prepping all the people, we're talking to the artists, we're talking to the labels, we're talking to the managers, we're talking to the fans, and we're in a hub of technology and music converging all on itself. Felt really exciting. Like it felt like the fireworks were imminent. And when we launched, I think we had like 300 people like listening in that moment, like, or within that day or whatever. And there was a lot of us that felt like, wow, that's like, we want more than that. But at the same time, we had 300 people who are willing to try what we did. And, by the next day, it was like 3,000. And by the next week, it was like 30,000. And then eventually you stop counting. Well, it's in the millions at some point, right? And you're building for a totally different audience, and you're so far down the path that you kind of forgot what you built and put out in the market on that first day anyway, right? It just started the process of building for your audience. And the 300 people that showed up were just like, man, I just want to be able to listen to some music in a cool new way. Like their bar is pretty low, right? They just wanted to try and do something, solve a minor pain point that they might have. Maybe it was a major one, but it was the opportunity to delight even a small group of people that were just like, yeah, this is cool. Like there's warts and bumps and bruises and all kinds of things that given the opportunity, we probably would have, fixed or changed or whatever. But when we look back at it, it was like, it was perfectly adequate to get out in the world and then start responding to the way that people were reacting to it. And so you do have that, being able to tell, like if we'd all said, well, if we don't have 100,000 people by day 2, then we failed somehow dramatically. And then, carry your head in disappointment or whatever it might be. And yet you get it out in the world and your initial people start to react and you start to see that I'm scratching an itch for some people out there. And so that's what we're trying to do. All right, now, how do we grow this? How do we scale it? How do we react to all of the stuff that's happening in the marketplace? People are starting to tell us things. We're learning stuff. We can reprioritize all the things we didn't get out in time. Let's figure out what that is and move with purpose. But had we just sat on it, not only would those 300 people not showed up, but the next 10,000 and the next 30,000 and the next 50,000. And by month 2 and month 3, we had a thing. We were humming. We were building with purpose. We had an audience that cared, and we were on our way. But I guarantee you, and I can tell you for sure, there were people in the room that were being like, "This isn't ready. We can't do this. We're not going to make it." Like, yeah, we're at South by Southwest, but what if the whole world of music says these guys didn't make it? Their cake is too soupy. Like, what did they do? And yet, we had to say, it's time. It's good enough to take this next step forward, and it does not mean it has to be perfect.
That's such an excellent point right there at the end. It just made me think of, I guess we don't usually get into like tips and tactics and hacks or things like that or shortcuts all that often when we talk, but that one just sort of jumped at me because it reminded me of maybe there is a little tactic in there. If you are in a room, in a meeting, or whatever the context is, you're talking about the launch or you're talking about the thing, the timing for the launch or the details or whatever, like listen for the person or the group of people or just the storyline of fear and anxiety, like masquerading as wisdom. Is that person who's like, well, I don't know. There's a few more landmines I could foresee. We haven't turned over every rock where there's some thing that's just going to explode and kill the whole thing. Let's make sure we do a few more cycles around making sure we've identified every potential landmine and trap along the way. Because the answer is you're not ever going to do that. It's not ever going to happen. But that's certainly an archetype often in the meeting or in the room, is the person who postures as being very wise and very smart and intelligent because they want to make sure they're ultra cautious and careful. Yes, you need that. Again, we're not advocating for being reckless. Just make sure that your ears are open for fear masquerading as wisdom, masquerading as smarts. Something else, and challenge this assertion because also while you were talking, what it made me think of is, well, I'm kind of trying to play devil's advocate with some of the positions in my own head and going, well, I know what it's like when the team or the company is like, well, we kind of do need to launch big though, because really what we need, what the business requires in this moment is a lot of attention. So that's really what we're saying, is that we're always hunting attention, but now we've got this new thing, getting attention, stealing attention more often than not is what it equates to. But that's really important to the business. That popped into my head because you said two things that stood out as really important to me in the context of thinking about a launch, which is to go to yourself or go to your team and say, hey, we're all on the same page, right? With who is this for? We've got a really good understanding of who is this for, right? And we also have a really good understanding of what is this for? That's those sort of like design thinking components, the who's it for and what's it for. Who is it for? The customers, your cake analogy. These are people who are just kind of starving, man. They just need some cake. Let's not make sure we're withholding the cake because we're misaligned with the who's it for and the what's it for. It's also worth noting that sometimes that desire for let's say it's a business, to just earn attention in the context of a launch that's saying the business is who's it for in that moment is the business. Maybe we've lost sight of the customer. And what it reminds me of in that breath, so here's the assertion to challenge, is also the exercise of just going out and trying to win attention is easy to understand. If you're going into like the C-suite or the leadership team or at the board meeting and going, guys, we're going to run Super Bowl ads. People like nod their heads and like, oh yeah, I know what a Super Bowl ad is. Like, so it's a very safe way, but you're wearing a Rip City hoodie right now. Where'd you hear about that hoodie? Was it on that Super Bowl ad that they ran? Of course not. I can't think of a single brand that probably any of us here have brought into the intimate inner circles of our life that we first heard about and acknowledged because of the Super Bowl ad or the big spectacle of whatever. Almost every brand that's managed to make an impact in our life. In fact, just extend that to art, to music, to culture that you feel emotionally connected to. Where'd you hear about it? Was it from the big launch? Was it from the fireworks and the light show? Probably not. So I guess my assertion for you to challenge is, do you think sometimes we get romanced with this idea of launching big just because it's an easy sell to the boss?
I think that, yes. It's easy to say yes to that because we love sexy stuff. And it is easy to understand, whether it's a Super Bowl ad or not. And I think a big part of that, and where frankly, most of the big spectacle launches are not the grand reveal, really. And many times they already know. I already am going to fulfill the promises we've already said we were going to fulfill. My risk is not high. Like, I'm going to go spend $100 million and launch this massive thing or whatever it might be. The Apple commercials over the years, like from the initial iPod launch, through iTunes and some things like this, massive, massive launches. But at the same time, in a lot of those cases, it was a known quantity, right? When we watch Super Bowl ads, we see Super Bowl ads with Doritos. Very few people will be like, I have no idea what Doritos are. This Super Bowl ad is maybe convincing me to try these newfangled chips that they're talking about. Like, it's just not really where we discover stuff in those moments, right? In a lot of cases, the big fireworks are the brands and products that a lot of us already celebrate in some way. It's the sequel to the movie that was a sleeper hit, right? It's the follow-on product that was a massive success that everybody expects to be a massive success. I don't remember the Kanye Jay-Z product that they were pushing, but I would almost be willing to bet it was a very popular product that already existed in people's minds. It was a Samsung Galaxy phone, or it was a whatever, right? And it wasn't something where we were all being like, oh man, this brand new brand and this brand new product that nobody's ever heard of in any way at all is being launched in this ridiculous way with all of this hoopla around it. And we all have to pay attention to it. Like, that is actually pretty rare. Like, most people don't make bets like that on something where there's just a wild amount of uncertainty. It is pretty rare that you see that. And so I think it is, yes, I think those are sexy things. Yes, it gets the boss excited. Yeah, we're going to throw a big party. And we're kind of really throwing the party for ourselves in a lot of those cases, right? Because we want people to feel excited and empowered, the sense of achievement, and we hit a milestone. It's rarely about the people we built the product for. Like, it's often a celebration of ourselves in those moments. And that's not an unhealthy thing, right? Like, sometimes if you've got the means and you've got the ability and you're not going to blow your entire rest of your company budget and profits on this one thing to celebrate yourselves with each other, those are moments that should be celebrated. And those are the moments where we do feel achievement. We're not done. Like, sometimes that's the fallacy, is that, like, we did it, guys, like, done. We put the product out there. We're like, we are done. That is definitely not the thing. And I don't know too many corporate executives who would be like, good party, guys. We totally did it. Like, it's over. Like, that just doesn't happen. Right. But those moments do feel momentous, right? We remember those things. Like, I remember a launch that we did with Slacker Radio and ESPN and at Comic-Con. And we had celebrities there, and we were racing Ford cars around because we did an integration with Ford, and Ford was there and ESPN was there and we were there. and all the Comic-Con, fun people were there. There was nobody who was really a subscriber of Slacker Radio who wanted ESPN, who were all standing out in the streets waiting for us to tell them this happened. It was really a celebration of achievement of the work that got us there and the acknowledgement of all the work that was in front of us that remained.
Yeah, now I'm concerned that somebody listening is going, yeah, thanks, James. Like, I wasn't trying to listen to the show and have you kill the launch party. I would like launch parties. Thank you very much. Like, I'm not trying to move anybody away from the launch party. So don't take it as a prescription to kill the launch party. Not only because, yeah, that's fun. It's a good time. But also, of course, there's loads of value as people who are building teams, running teams, managing teams, making sure we are being mindful of our culture and celebrating what almost certainly is the yeoman's work that went into just getting something out the door if you are doing collaborative work. So don't construe my position as don't throw the launch party. Yes, just make sure you know why you're throwing the launch party. And those reasons are just fine. That's totally fine. The other thing that comes to mind is outside of a large organization or a team or an entity that has resources to do this stuff in the first place, what if you're just sitting with an idea as an independent creator, as an independent artist or a builder? Somebody's like, I'm finally going to sit down and write this book. I'm finally, you and I have this podcast. There's somebody else who's going, I'm going to finish the record. Or you know what? Even in a business context, I've been sitting on this idea. I'm finally happy. I'm going to pitch it to the boss. I got a new approach I think they got to hear. I'm just going to do it. Many situations, bubble up where you just don't have the resources to do that stuff in the first place. So with that in mind, and I guess I'm biased, I'm thinking of it in the context of, I guess maybe artists, maybe more often than not, what's the advice for that cohort? What's the advice for that population when they go, I feel like I'm just not ready yet. Or let me polish it a little bit more. I don't have the resources to do it. Maybe I'm just not quite ready to do it. Maybe next year. What do you say to that person?
Man, it's funny because we do talk, when we talk about the launch party and we talk about like the corporate event or the release of a big product or whatever. Well, we all have, any of us who've been part of that, you have your place in that, right? You have, I know my contribution. I feel like I contributed to this, but it is very different than my personal creative moment that I feel is precious to me, that somehow is meaningful to me. Whether it's my painting, my song, my book, my product, whatever it might be, that I'm just so personally connected to, that we're all wary of being judged in a way that's uncomfortable. And so it is different. You have to get comfortable with what does it mean to put that out in the world? And what are you really afraid of? Is it going to be that you're like, wow, I thought you were a good painter, and now that I saw this, you're clearly not, right? Like, that's what our mind tells us. Our mind tells us that someone's going to hear my song and they're just not going to like it, and they're not going to think I even deserve to be making music like this. And then that's going to crush my spirit, and I'm not going to want to do it anymore. And that fear really weighs on us. And it's real, right? That's a human feeling, right? Like, we don't want to be judged so critically that it kind of kills that passion that made us want to make it in the first place. I think that's where our fear lives. But there's also the validation of making a thing and sharing it with the world in some way. Now, oftentimes we say the world, and sometimes that's scary, right? We think about, the world is somehow going to see this, and that's scary. And then the reality is that it's almost always a smaller group of people than we think. And those initial people that react to what we put out, they're often much more sympathetic to what it takes to put that out there in the first place, right? Those first people that see our painting, the first people that hear our song, the first people that read our story, whatever it might be, those people actually cared enough to lean in and try. And we can reference the pod too, right? Like, who are the first people that listen to this? It's our friends, it's our family, it's our network, it's people we trust, it's people who will tell us the truth, it's people that will react in a way that isn't as scary. And sometimes I think where our fear lies is that somebody who might be, quote unquote, better than us is going to critique our work in a way that feels less than. And then I feel diminished for putting it out in the world in the first place. But those aren't the first people who experience our work. those people are way down the road when we've already started to build the audience of people who appreciate what it was in the first place. You really do have to kind of acknowledge the fact that if you've made something out of passion and you know that there's a pocket of people out there that it may resonate with, is do your best to put it in their hands first so that you can have that shared experience with some people who are going to be, really empathetic with what you've done, right? Which I tried. I did my thing. I'm putting it out here, and I might get tremendous positive feedback that makes me actually want to do more. I want to do the next version of this. I want to keep putting this out because the reaction I'm getting is so nice and it makes me feel good to get that. But it also might be a light level of criticism that says, "Oh, okay, I actually could do better," and I hadn't even thought of that. I hadn't even considered how that might have made this better. But now that I have this next ring of people to provide that reaction, I actually can improve upon my art in a way that doesn't feel self-defeating or doesn't feel vulnerable to the extreme that I might be afraid of. And now I'm improving it. And the next wave of people can experience it, and so on and so on. And if the fourth ring of people provides a harsh amount of criticism, I'm insulated by the initial people who validated that it was worth me putting it out in the world in the first place.
We certainly drift to this spot more often than not on the show, which I think is fair because many times we're talking about this intersection of the things we do at work and the things around us in culture and in life is just how much influence and real horsepower our lizard brain has for each of us. That even though we have thousands of years of evolution kind of stacked up on us, and here we are, at this moment in time as human beings, there's a lot of deeply rooted emotional drivers around how we make choices every day. And it certainly comes into play when we think about putting our work into the world. Because there's a version of that story that says, oh my God, I will be shamed, I will be cast out of the tribe, and I will be left for dead. Because I have brought shame on my people and my tribe by virtue of me being so bad at what I have done. I will be laughed out of the tent. I mean, that's somewhere in there, right? It's akin to, why we don't raise our hand in the meeting sometimes in other situations, because we equate it at a primal level with death. Like, I'm just going to die. That's really what it means. So I love that piece of the story in the context of this story about launching things, especially for the independent creator, the small startup, the team that isn't as resourced as the team over at Samsung, to go run with your Galaxy, analogy, is just make sure you're marking the very human, very emotional, lizard brain driven components that we all bring to the table when it comes to thinking about how we bring our work into the world. And I would be totally remiss if I didn't mention Stephen Pressfield's book, The War of Art. It gets tossed around through so many creative circles. I'm sure people hearing this are nodding their head going, yeah, I heard that book. If you haven't, I absolutely recommend it. Go check it out. But the premise in Pressfield's work is that every creative, but he kind of expands that definition of creative into an interesting place as well. But he personifies that force, that negative counterbalance that's keeping us from putting our work into the world. He personifies that as the resistance. So that's Stephen Pressfield's concept of the resistance. And he basically argues in the book, hey, if you have signed up to create things and show up in the world and say, hey, here world, here's my thing that I've made or that we have made, you are signing up to do battle with the resistance every single day. Just see it for what it is. It is a force that is actively chasing you, telling you every reason you shouldn't, all of the negative thoughts and the possible traps and the landmines and all the reasons you just shouldn't do it. And the premise in the book is it's a real thing. Just see it, and don't ever think you get to a place where it just goes away, because it doesn't. But maybe start to reframe the resistance in a way where you can also train your brain to go, if the resistance shows up, that's a signal that I'm onto something. Because there's almost certainly no meaningful work or art that has ever been done or put into the world that hasn't had to push its way through the resistance, to stick with his analogy, in order to make its way into the world. So I certainly have that conversation when I talk to artists, because a part of the job is to wrestle with that, resistance in releasing your work and making it real, is to resist the urge to continue to polish the thing, to understand when you are truly just afraid of the criticism or the embarrassment or whatever the negative outcome is on the other end. We have to kind of realize that as creators of things, art, business, companies, products, and services, that if you really want to stretch that definition of art and the artist's mindset around all of that, it's really about saying you have to bring your artist mindset to the table, because it means that the job of being a professional in the lane that you are in is to try to just do work and deliver work that might not work. I mean, that's what you do when you get up on stage. This might not work. That's what you do when you give the presentation and you go to slide 6 and the boss goes, "Can you go back to slide 5? Oh, shoot. This isn't going to work." I mean, that's the job. And it's a very real thing. And sometimes I feel like almost, you need to be in groups of artist and business therapy, which I think this pod helps us both with some version of that, is you got to say some of this stuff out loud, right? And just remark on it so that other people know that, yeah, it's a thing. It's a thing to take seriously, but you're not going to be cast out. And kind of to your point, or at least what one of your comments reminded me of, is an interesting muscle to try to develop, because it certainly helps, at least in my opinion, to get past the nerves, let's say, of that launch. Can I get a thing? Can I actually just hit publish and put it out into the world? Is to try to develop a muscle around, okay, not if the negative feedback comes, but when the negative feedback comes, can I parse that feedback and extract the useful bits of it and not let the not so useful bits of that sink me? Because there's still opportunity in there, right? Is to learn, whether it's from your customer feedback or anything.
Yeah, and I think it reminds me of any kind of on-stage performance, let's say. Comedians are a great example of this. You're going to have some validation ahead of time, right? And all of us who make a thing, we have some people we trust, we have some places we can try things, we can do small sample sizes of get some reactions. Very few of us have ever taken a product to market with zero initial feedback, right? Like, I mean, that is a risky proposition. You should at least get some validation from some of the people who you're building or creating it for, to get some of that initial reaction. There's not very many comedians that are going to go stand up on stage and tell 20 jokes and get 0 laughs, right? Like, that they might want that, or there's people who might think that's even part of the fun. But the things that are going to get a little bit of laughs, the things that might work a little bit, and you start sharpening that up. But you certainly aren't going to go show up at Madison Square Garden to a sold out group of people, not having tried one of the jokes that you're about to tell. Like, that's just not going to happen. That's your spectacle. That's your fireworks, right? You're doing this massive reveal of, Kevin Hart shows up and he's doing his big comedy show on Netflix. He's already been around the world and done that show a zillion times. And when he does it for the fireworks, it's going to work, right? There's very little uncertainty that remains of that. This audience is going to laugh. They are going to react in a positive way. But the first version of one of those jokes, somebody's probably like, "Man, that does not, no, that doesn't work. That's not only is it not funny, but it's kind of, insulting that you would even have told it in the first place." And you're like, okay, yeah, let me work on that. But it wasn't a reason to not try, right? Like the fact that those the initial versions of all that may have been some kind of a failure. But it is interesting. And I think, you have an interesting point of view on this, and maybe not everybody who listens to our show knows that you've played in a band and you play music and you've been in front of people and you've released things to the world that maybe at times you or the people in your band might have been like, I don't know if this is ready. I don't know if we're ready. Who are we playing today? Who are we opening for? How many people are going to be there? Like, what are we hoping is going to happen here? And like, what are we most afraid of? How do you frame that up in such a way that you're like, all right, we're going to push the button and the songs that we made are going out to the world. And the lights are going to eventually turn on and we are going to be on stage playing music for people. How do you know that the audience that's standing there is ready for what you're about to do?
That's a great question. Yes, it's true. I have spent time playing in bands, coaching and kind of advising musicians and artists. If I reflect back on those moments where you were in a studio working on a thing, you're getting ready to, go on stage, I certainly remember very clearly being on the road and tour for weeks and weeks and months playing clubs you've never heard of and places you've never heard of with, 2, 3, 4, 5 people in the room. And it's really tough to go through that and go, what are we doing? Like, why are we doing this? It certainly helps. And this is more of maybe an underlying premise for anybody who's trying to find energized to play the long game, is it certainly helps when you are psychologically and mentally and emotionally enrolled in the journey. Like, we wanted to be musicians. We wanted to be playing songs. The context by which we were doing it certainly didn't feel great right out of the gates, but at least we had enough energy in the tank because we were all willingly enrolled in that journey of being musicians, that certainly helped to kind of offset that. But the truth is, God, you're never ready. It's never ready. And if you feel like it is ready, and I guess maybe it just makes you think of the Reid Hoffman thing too. It's like, boy, you've probably missed the boat, because ironically, more often than not, the stuff that you either think isn't ready or isn't good enough is the stuff that resonates with somebody that in a way that you never would have expected. And what you realize by just showing up kind of night after night after night is, oh, that's actually the hack, is who can just keep coming back, who can just keep showing up and continue to do it. Because what happens every time you do it is you have this new little spark of a connection with some person or a couple of people, and it turns into something else. And that kind of little cluster of activity and energy, collides with some other little cluster of people and activity and energy. And the next thing you know, it's compounded over and over and over again. So the only real kind of tried and true approach was, are we optimizing for staying in this game? Are we optimizing for continuing to put our work and our art into the world, whether that be on stage or in a recorded form or not? And boy, that is like the classic musician's dilemma. Are we here to shine the thing till it's perfect and we all just feel that we're bulletproof? Like, get ready, guys. We're putting out the White Album. I heard it start to finish. I know it's perfect. I know it's Sgt. Pepper. I mean, it just doesn't happen. And you see that happen constantly with musicians, where you just stay locked in the studio or whatever because you've been allowed to be the one as the engineer, and it's never done.
Yeah, so here I have another question for you on that. And I think for people listening, this kind of stuff helps too, which is that you get an interesting frame of reference. If, let's say, your first or second show is in Fort Smith, Arkansas, and there's 17 people there when you first start to play, and somewhere in your mind you tell yourself that, first of all, even if we're terrible tonight, 17 people are going to find out that we were terrible, and that probably doesn't really affect us too much. Or 17 people are going to be blown away by us in a way that they did not expect, and they'll become advocates for us, and we'll leave feeling kind of empowered by that. But I think sometimes what we do is we build up this worst case scenario that I'm going to show up in Fort Smith, Arkansas, and 17 people are going to hate me. And then they're going to go tell everyone that they know how awful I am. And those people will never show up to my next show. And then my whole career's over because I couldn't delight these 17 people. And the reality is there's almost no way to lose, because I'm either going to knock it out of the park and those people will become advocates and influencers, and they'll provide that feedback that I'm craving for performing my art, or they're going to stand around with their hands in their pockets and sip their drinks and barely acknowledge that I'm there, or be like, yeah, I don't know if I go to that show again. But so what, right? Like, I mean, the moment was, there really wasn't an outcome where your whole career is at stake in this moment. Like, it's just not. And I think sometimes we convince ourselves that these moments are so precious during these launches or these initial rollouts or the debut of the thing, that somehow the most horrible outcome could happen in that moment. And it would just be all for nothing, right? And I'm just, my whole dreams are crushed and all these things. And as much as we talk about how the grand reveal is the way that everybody gets exposed to this brand new thing, how rare that really is, the true overnight, reveal that no one saw coming. The opposite is also true, which is the grand failure also requires, a massive amount of effort to bomb so catastrophically that people remember it. And that's the rare movie, the rare whatever that happens where we're just like, what were they thinking? Like, that was an absolute disaster. Where most of us have this in our head, have this version of how awful something could go. And the reality is that that's not even in the cards. It's probably not even on the table for that to even come out that way.
Dude, that is a phenomenal point. That's a phenomenal point. The amount of effort it would take to catastrophically fail is equally impressive and heroic. And again, there's that lizard brain again. It shows up because you're literally talking about death. It's going to kill you. The thing that you did is probably going to kill you. Also, aside, and just refresh my memory. Have I ever talked to you about Fort Smith, Arkansas?
No.
We absolutely played Fort Smith, Arkansas. I thought you started talking and I was like, did I tell him Fort Smith, Arkansas?
No, if there's an awesome story there, I want to hear it. For the people who don't know,
it's the Hangman's Town. It was the gateway to the West, dude. I've been through the Hangman's Museum in Fort Smith, Arkansas. We played there regularly.
100%.
I can tell you all about it.
I'll tell you a very quick story. I know the guy who goes out and buys Masonic temples and turns them into music venues. And he bought the Masonic temple in Fort Smith, Arkansas, and turned it into a music venue. And it's really awesome to go see a show there.
I know exactly what you are talking about. That is wild. So we went through Fort Smith many a time. In fact, I remember, lots of fun stories there. But to your point, and it was extremely helpful on our journey to go play the Fort Smith, Arkansas of the country and the world, which we certainly had plenty of those. But only by virtue of continuing to go back to Fort Smith and all those similar places did you start to intimately understand that, the job is really, to what degree am I built? Are we built? Have we built systems that allow us to keep coming back to town and to keep showing up for these people? Because it compounded. It compounded every single time, to your point. It's not like we turned around and we weren't playing, arenas and things like that. But what you felt as a creator in those moments is you just felt momentum. And I think that's a really important characteristic to kind of touch on in the context of this conversation. And maybe it's where you were going with the hey, if you are a builder, if you're thinking about what gets you off of the bench and into the game and maybe over that hump of anxiety, is look for those first 10, look for that trusted inner circle you can start to share with. Is just knowing that the compounding nature of telling a few and taking their temperature and showing up with your work, your art, or whatever, and starting to measure it by, did they tell anybody else? I mean, did they just tell anybody else? That was kind of enough. And what you could feel in those moments is that they told a couple other people. And that was the momentum that helped. And sometimes you can find that by going to that trusted circle is really you're saying, well, how am I going to measure success with my new book idea or whatever? Well, it's to what degree can you get a sense of momentum by starting to share it with a few key people? And by the way, if the answer is, none, that's okay too. It might mean that the work isn't ready yet. That's all right. But at least you know. At least you know. And I just think that was the single biggest eye-opening moment in those early days of touring a lot, was going back through the Fort Smiths and going, it's not hundreds, but it's more. And that little dose of momentum got you to the end of the day and got you through, load out and going, okay, we'll go, we'll just keep going like a little bit more. And that's the work.
Yeah, it is. It's the work, and I think, and it goes back to managing the expectations, right? But what we're really looking for is some kind of validation that the effort we put into this was worth it in some way, right? Like that it's worth continuing that work. It might be another way to say that, to where, yeah, those first few people, those 300 people I told you at Slacker Radio, like, we reached out to them. Hey, we're glad you joined us, right? Tell us about your experience. What could we do better? Are you excited about this? Are there signals there that they might be telling other people that this is a fun, cool thing that they're experiencing? And that, eventually, and not everybody, certainly people listening here may not know this, but eventually we got to tens of millions of people listening to Slacker Radio, right? But it was the hundreds at the beginning that made us keep going, right? Because if we had come out and said, well, if I don't have 30 million people listening to Slacker Radio in the first week or two here, then we have failed. Then you just set your expectations wrong, frankly, because you have to look at what's really attainable there. But if the long game is, I hope that we have tens of millions of fans at some point, people that care to tune in, care to try this service of ours. And we did it. But we did it because you had hundreds and you had thousands and you had tens of thousands and on and on and on until you had millions. And now you've got the resistance, and now you've got all of these pieces pushing back on you saying, I don't know if your thing's as good as you think it is, but you have a whole group of people who on the other side say, we love it. It's great. I'm glad I showed up. I'm glad I'm part of this. I enjoy this. I'm fighting on your behalf. I'm pushing against the resistance myself because I'm part of your tribe now. And that's really what we're looking for, is that we bring people in that are close enough that embrace what we're doing, and it caters to whatever that need was that they had, that you filled with it. And then they become part of that voice. And that's really what we're trying to do. And I think, just to come back again on, I know that there's people listening now. I know that there's people sitting in conference rooms somewhere. There's people who are like, are we really ready to put this out in the world? Like, yeah, we've been working on this a while. I just don't know if it's done. And be able to start to challenge what would be what's going to be the harm if we put this out in the world for real? Like, what's the real harm in this? Are we going to crush our brand and everyone's going to hate us and forever? Probably not, right? It takes a lot to do that. There's instances, right? New Coke from the 80s, that's still a legendary failure that may have been a big marketing stunt from the jump. But being able to go in and say, let's set some real expectations. Let's make sure we're not failing our most important customer that we have right now, the people who are going to really literally go talk to. The people in the room just want a piece of cake. I'm not going to disappoint them. Then I'm off to a good start, right? If my end goal is win the cake baking competition, and I'm going to start with some people that just want to eat some cake right now, I have a path now. I have a path to get there. And I have a path to take my first few hundred Slacker radio listeners and turn them into millions of people. I have my path to go. And it doesn't require the fireworks and the big, massive event to unlock it, or to somehow achieve massive success in the first days and minutes of releasing this to the world. But I do have to feel like, as long as I'm not going to radically disappoint the most important people I'm doing this for, then I'm ready to take my first step, and I'm ready to build on this. I'm ready to make it better. And that's the part that, if it's your song, it's your painting, it's your show, it's your book, it's your product, it's your whatever, the first people that you're like, I think you're going to like this, I'd like you to try it. And they're like, you know what? This is pretty good. You're already on your way. There's no reason to be afraid. You are not going to radically disappoint those first few people that show up and be like, I don't know what you guys were doing. Like, this isn't, everything failed. It was a horrible disaster. And guess what? Even if it was, it might have just been the 17 people in Fort Smith. And you're like, you know what, guys? Sorry, we just didn't have it tonight. But I'm still glad you came out. And I promise you, next time we come into town, we're going to crush it. And then that's becomes your thing, right?
That's right. That's right. I think it's certainly true in the context of thinking about artists, but I absolutely would argue this as well for professionals and people in companies and businesses in commercial settings. It's worth reminding yourself that if there is a version of you, or a version of your business or your company that you want to exist in the world, meaning I want to be a writer, let's say, that's my version of me, or I want to be a technology startup in this area of expertise. The only way you get to that place is by sharing the work. And it means getting comfortable with everything we've been talking about this whole time. I just think of things like, Van Gogh he was not born a French Impressionist painter. He painted his way into one day becoming and being a French Impressionist painter. Who he was in the world is a total artifact of the choices he made to decide to share a certain type of work with the world. Some artists withhold and some artists share. Like, maybe that's a topic for another day type of thing. But it's worth, in my mind, just remarking on that fact that the only way you get to transform into the thing you may want to be, or to exist, or to have exist in the world, is to go down this path. You have to produce things, and you have to be generous enough and brave enough to share it. And yes, sometimes that means inviting in the feedback that might be terrifying and soul crushing and super uncomfortable. But if we can figure out, again, how do I think about parsing that feedback into a bucket of useful and a bucket of not so useful, and taking what I need and moving on to continue to iterate, it just feels like that's the only real tried and true playbook in any of this that we're talking about, is that don't be so afraid to launch that you don't ever launch. Don't mistake, fear for wisdom, or vice versa, however that's said better. Realize that everything that comes after the launch is arguably probably the more important part. Is to what degree are you really optimized for continuing to be consistent and show up over and over and over again? Because we're not launching rockets, man. We're trying to lay bricks. You're trying to lay a foundation by which you can build something upon. But boy, that lizard brain shows up in lots of different ways, and that's not nothing.
It sure does. And The one thing I do now, some of us do have jobs that are life and death things, and the scrutiny and maybe the level of quality and all of the things that you're striving for are different when you're like, okay, if I don't do this right, people will die. Okay. I mean, there are people who get up in the morning, and if they don't do the right thing, or they don't launch the thing in the right way, or they don't produce the right stuff, it is a life and death situation. And for those of you out there, there is a different line, right? Like, you are having to judge it by, when I roll this thing out there, are we sure that the people aren't going to die, right? Like, this is an important thing.
We don't want to rush the pacemakers to
That's right.
market.
We need to be careful about certain things. However, and I do I try to impress this on a lot of the teams that I work with. Most of us have jobs that do not live on the edge of life and death. While we solve problems for people, and we make things that maybe enhance people's lives, and we fill some need that they have, whatever it might be, most of us do not provide that level of service to somebody where if we fail, something absolutely catastrophic is going to happen. Most of us make entertainment things. Most of us make toys. Most of us make productivity tools. Most of us make art that's meant to delight people, whatever it might be. But most of the outcomes of those are really self-imposed, right? We look at this as being, what's going to happen to me if this doesn't go well? And that's the part we can get over, right? That's the part we can say, like, what, I'm going to learn more. I'm going to experience more. I'm putting this out in the world to share. And really, the people who are going to lean into it first are going to be the same people who are going to be credible and honest and transparent with me, so that I can improve. And it's not going to be a super scary thing. And if we can kind of realize the fact that if I take a step forward, and it's not perfect, and it's flawed in some fundamental ways, but the people that I stepped closer towards received me in that way. That's like, yeah, I'm glad you stepped forward. Here's some feedback, but overall, I'm glad you're on this journey. I'm going to kind of be on here with you. The negative outcome is so different than what we think it could be. The massive failure that we have in our minds is always about how we might feel, and not necessarily what may happen as a result of me failing. Be real with what the consequences are here, because most of the time it's a fear that we've set up for ourselves as being like, how might this scare me, or add a level of angst and frustration and fear to me, and that worries me, and so I don't want to do it. But we trick ourselves in some ways into thinking that I'm somehow affecting all these people out there in this very negative way, and that all this, I'm putting bad things out into the world, and that's going to react. That the people receiving it are somehow going to be disappointed, and all this stuff, and that's just usually not the case, unless, of course, you're like, check out this new pacemaker 5.0, made it in my garage. Pretty sure it's going to work. Let's put it in 1,000 people and see what happens. Like, nobody does that, and so. You have to be real with yourself of being like, am I just internally afraid? Is it my lizard brain? Is it like I somehow feel like bad things are going to happen to me if this happens? Because most of the time, that's just not the case. And also, most of the time, the negative outcome of a launch that's not fully polished, if anything, it just speeds up the next version. It just makes us better faster. It's like, if we just sit in our own little world and keep polishing, we might not even be polishing the right thing. We don't know.
That's right. It reminded me of an acronym. I wish I could remember who said it. Probably should have looked it up while we were talking, but I didn't. Maybe I'll find it, put it in the show notes. But did you ever hear that one that the acronym is just fear, false expectations appearing real? Like, that was sort of the stack. And I was like, oh, that's pretty good. Somebody much smarter than you or me probably said that. I don't know what it is. But I think of that one. Something I know we're getting close to probably needing to land the plane here. Maybe it's for another episode. But I definitely think this mindset extends, especially for artists, into the realm of how comfortable can you start to get with promoting your work after you've launched it? Because I definitely know that there's a narrative in artistic communities that to promote your work feels somehow sleazy and just gross. And everybody wants to get back to doing the work. Nobody wants to go put out a press release and post on social media and do all this, promotional marketing stuff. It feels like, why can't I just do my art and be left alone and get back to doing the work? I would argue that these things, just like launching, promoting the work, sharing it with some velocity and volume and energy behind it, is equally important if you can frame it as an act of generosity, right? And try to move yourself out of that headspace of, especially again, on that promotional side, maybe specifically, or not specifically, but thinking of artists, that idea of, I don't want to go shill to have people tune into my art. That just feels icky. Well, it's actually kind of selfish to do that, because you got to ask yourself sometimes, hey, how many things am I glad that I heard about because somebody put some effort into promoting it that wouldn't have ended up on my radar, at all, if somebody hadn't poured a little gas on some marketing engine or some promotional engine to make sure it landed in my feed or my inbox or whatever. There's loads of stuff I can think of that I'm glad that I heard of. If you've put real time and effort and care and thought behind your work, your project, the product, the thing, well, you know what? It's also an act of service to go pour some promotional marketing gas on the thing. And not only to get it out the door and launch it, but to try to amplify it a bit, because that can be perceived very much so as a generous act of service. If the person on the other end would be glad that they heard from you, that they would be glad to know that the work that you put in to go build this thing is going to pay off for them in some way, shape, or form. You kind of owe that, in my opinion, that's a responsibility you should take on as well. Because I think the inverse of just, I want to just get back to doing the work is a total trap, because it disconnects the promotion of the work from the creation of the work, when really they're the same. They both require that wrestling with the resistance and the artist mindset and that fear of doing something that just might not work. That fear of like, what are the others going to say about me? How am I going to be talked about? And how soul crushing is that going to be? It's like you're wrestling with the same stuff.
Yeah. And maybe on the promotional side too, again, sometimes it helps to reframe the way you think of promotion, right? Like same way that we reframe our fears into what might happen, is that in a lot of cases, promotion is just engaging with the people who are interested in what you're trying to do. And that alone can be nourishing, right? Where you're talking to a group of people who are interested in what you're doing. Those are going to be the first people you engage with. However you promote, that's what you're doing. You're putting your work out enough, whether, I don't care if you're just telling the people in your neighborhood, or you're doing a massive press release, or you've got a huge marketing campaign, or whatever it might be. The reality is, what you're doing is putting information about what you're doing, and you're connecting with the people who are interested in what you're up to, whatever that might be. If you view it as being kind of sleazy, right, you're discounting the fact that what I'm not really doing is I'm connecting with people who are interested in what I'm trying to do. And by making them aware and giving them an opportunity to lean in, I'm inviting them into that process as well. And for anybody who makes something, you really have to value the fact that there's people out there that are interested in what you're doing and want to react and connect with you on that. And that it doesn't feel shameless or sleazy or anything else when someone says, hey, I noticed you did this thing and I'm interested in that. However they express that. They follow you on social media, they write you a comment, you talk to them in the club, whatever it is, you have a moment of engagement there, where not only are you kind of learning, like, well, how did you find me? How did this, how did you discover me? Why are you excited about this? Those conversations can happen. But also just the fact that by leaning into promotion, what you're really doing is inviting that initial audience to come in to that circle and be part of it with you. And really, that's most of us who've ever created anything. That's all we want, right? We want people who are like, I'm interested in the thing that you've created. I've now heard about what you're doing, and I'm leaning into that, whatever that might be. And that will offset even the scariest fear that we have, is that you even got one person who says, I'm really interested in what you're doing, and I want to be kind of part of it somehow, whatever that might be. And I know even for us, for the pod, right, we've gotten reactions from people that we know. They're just like, hey, I really enjoyed this, or it felt like I kind of connected with you again, or I shared it with somebody that I trust, or somebody that I felt like could use this in some way. And as a creator, those are the moments that you want. It doesn't matter if you've got millions of them, right? It's those initial stories, those initial connections. That's where promotion starts. That's where the launch starts. That's where you start to break down those barriers of fear that you have. And you start to say, I've got little pieces, little threads of validation here. And I want to try and nourish those a little bit. And promotion is the word we sometimes label on that. But really what you're doing is you're trying to make sure the audience is aware of what you're doing. You're giving them an opportunity to lean in, and then you're inviting that exchange and opportunity so that you can improve, that they can share, and overall you kind of grow together. And that's really all we're all trying to do when we make stuff, I think.
I think the inverse of that is also really interesting, because that dynamic is absolutely true. And that's an incredibly salient point. It also means that you are, by design, intentionally building an exclusion list. We're saying that it's not for everybody. The only way you get to what you just described is by not being for everybody, is by not thinking that I'm going to win with the Super Bowl ad. Or if you think of like the adoption curve and the stuff that sits in the middle, it's like, I kind of can't be for the stuff in the middle, because the people in the middle, they're not looking for stuff. They're looking to kind of feel safe with what everybody else is kind of already doing. So by design, I am signing up to bring into my world people who my work is not for. And that's okay. That's a muscle worth building, is getting really comfortable with that. Oh, this isn't for you. Thank you. Thank you very much for letting me know. It's helping sharpen, who I think this is for. I appreciate you, spending the time, appreciate the comment, the feedback. And that's hard, but boy, that's kind of good news. Meaning it's equally good news when you got people saying, it's kind of not for me. I heard your pod. It's not really for me. Awesome. Thank you. That's helpful. That helps kind of cull the list into a more focused area. That's a good thing. I mean, I remember, I'll kind of end it here because I think we could probably put a bow on this. But to that point, I remember the first summer we played Warped Tour, and just for dating the experience a bit, we had a record out. We were going around to kids at Warped Tour with holding a Discman with headphones, asking them to listen to a song on the headphones and pressing play and go, here, no, just, hey, stranger, can I bug you for a second? We're here. We play on this stage at this time or whatever. Can you just check out we just put out this record. Check it out. I cannot even, the number of kids, man, no, get out of here. You want to put that on my ears? Don't touch me. Get out of here. I mean, we were surrounded by people wearing black shirts and skinny jeans and all. I mean, this is supposed to be our people. Like we don't look totally out of place. But even in that context, I'm showing up, asking people to take a leap, asking people to let me put headphones on their ears and listen to the first 8 seconds of a thing and make some judgment as to whether or not they might go see the band play at 3:30 on the Ernie Ball stage, like over here. And oh my God, the pride swallowing siege of that day. We did it all day long. That was the gig. I mean, I think I probably said that when I interviewed for a radio sales job. It was like, how are you with rejection? I'm like, you know what? I'm pretty good at it. Because it's like, let me tell you about the onslaught of no's that you get. But that's the gig. And maybe that's what we're arguing for in this pod, is that as makers of things, builders of companies, of products and services, of art, is you got to try to have an orientation, around your work and the way you are in the world that's oriented around generosity and sharing the work. You got to get it out the door. Maybe you got resources to put Jay-Z and Kanye on a stage. Maybe you don't. I don't know. But ultimately, that's probably less important than the practice that comes after the launch. But you got to get to the launch. At least I feel that's what we're advocating for.
You got to get to the launch. You got to get to the launch. And I don't know this, and so I guess I'll put you on the spot here as we wrap it up. When you put the headphones on the kid who's like, dude, I'm into this. Like, okay, like I'll come see your show at noon on the, stage in the sun and whatever. Like, this is cool. And it's cool that the band is like right here. Like, I just met these guys. Like, it doesn't take too many of those to make you completely forget about everybody who's like, no, man, like, no, I don't want to listen to another second of this. And you move on.
It took one of those. It literally took one of those.
One. It takes one. And this is kind of my point, right? Which is like anybody sitting on the sidelines right now, and it's not out of pure, intellectual honesty that your product's not ready for prime time. It's really just a lot about fear and doubt and uncertainty and hand wringing and all of these things that come with not wanting to put your work out into the world. Is that you're putting it out there for the kid who said, yeah, I'm joining you on the stage, man. This is awesome that you guys are the band, man. Yes, I'm there. That's all it takes. Like you're looking for those people that you built the thing for in the first place. Maybe you didn't even know you built it for them in some cases, but in most cases, when we're talking about products and stuff, you're going to the people who you built it for, and they give you some of that initial validation. And that's the juice that makes all the next work worth it and make it feel exciting and all of this fun stuff. And if you just sit on the sidelines and keep everything precious to you and your team, and you polish and you refine and you hem and you haw and you wonder, well, what if some people don't like it? And what if I don't get the response I want? What if somebody writes a bad article about me? Or what if somebody says some negative comment on social media? So what? Because that stuff, one, is happening constantly anyway. But find the kid But when you put the headphones on them, they put a big smile on their face and they're like, man, this is going to be the story I tell everybody when I get back home. Because all of us have built products for people who are right there waiting to have that moment. And if we keep it to ourselves, not only do we not deny ourselves of that moment, we deny them too, right? Like, and so get your products out, launch these things. Don't hold them so dear to you that you're afraid of what might happen. Is that, yeah, if your cake's not done, don't feed it to people. But man, don't sit there and hand place every single sprinkle on the cake when all you got is people just like, just give me a piece of cake, man. Like, that's all I need. I don't need you to literally to place every sprinkle on this cake one by one. Let's go.
Amen, brother. Amen. I think that's the show. That's the wrap. Jonathan, it is always good to see you, my man. This has been Slackers. Guys, check the show notes. There are links to my work. There are links to Jonathan's work. There's also a link to leave us a comment. There's a page you can go to leave us a voice message if you have a question or you want to make a comment or let us know something that's on your mind. We love questions. We'll try to get some of those into the pod as we go. Thanks for being here. I'm Jaime.
I'm Jonathan.
This has been Slackers. Talk to you soon.